Hello everyone, my name is Anouar Benali and I'm a computational scientist working at Argonne National Lab, and today I will be presenting my work with my colleagues at Argonne using high accuracy many-body methods to describe ground state and excited states properties of strongly correlated. As an application, we choose to investigate the band gap of lithium cobalt dioxide as it is widely used as a cathode active material. In that case, knowing and understanding the band gap of the material from a theoretical point of view is rather important. Historically, lithium cobalt dioxide has been studied using density functional theory, and its properties and chemical performance have been also studied with the same method. Because lithium cobalt dioxide contains a 3D transition metal, DFT fails to reproduce all its properties correctly without adding a type of correction, namely the Hubbard U correction, that usually adds energy to the electrons in the 3D band. However, while this method allows us to get the correct band gaps, DFT+U underestimated the intercalation voltage and overestimated the lithium disorder transition temperatures. Additionally, DFT+U shows a transition to high spin state and describes lithium cobalt dioxide as an insulator, which is in stark contradiction with the experimental measurement. In this study, we try to see if fixed node DMC can provide a better theoretical description of the material, and we start that by trying to evaluate the band gap of the material. So historically, when studying transition metal oxides with diffusion Monte Carlo, one optimizes the position of the node by playing with the value of U. So by increasing the value of U, since the method is variational, one should get a minimum energy that corresponds to the best value of U, and this two-dimensional optimization of the nodal surface is sufficient to give very good results for a large set of transition metal oxides such as nickel oxide, vanadium oxide, or TiO2. In this specific case, we find something rather odd. By increasing the value of U, we see that we have a minimum energy starting to show up, but actually that minimum never happens. We keep minimizing the energy until we hit very large values of U, and at that point we start having energies that start spiking again. But when we check the magnetization, this system becomes magnetic, so we cannot even assume that the energy or the minimum energy is here. If we constrain at that point the magnetization of the system, then we start having a minimum energy around 11 electron volts, and this is true for both LDA+U and PBE+U. So this behavior is rather odd and never seen before in this class of materials. The values of U are way too large to be normal, and having magnetization that has to be constrained in order to get anything of value is rather strange. If we go further and evaluate the band gap using this very large value of PBE+U, we can see that actually here, when we compare it to simple DFT, our results using diffusion Monte Carlo is rather large for the band gap. The only way to start getting anything close to the experimental value is if we assume that there is an indirect gap between the gamma and N prime, and that is of course a little bit of stretch to be able to say that it is an indirect band gap just because our result fits better. And also, due to the very large size of the value of U, it is not certain that this result would be justified. So we choose to improve the quality of the trial wave function by increasing the complexity of the wave function and using a multi-determinant trial wave function generated using selected sCI method and namely the SIPC method within the sCI methods. So because of the size of the system, we can only use simulation cells made of 3 lithium cobalt dioxide systems and a triple zeta basis set limited to only the first 200 orbitals. This is still considered a very large system, but we use our implementation of SIPC with periodic boundary conditions. As a starting point for the orbitals, we're going to do multiple calculations using PBE+U orbitals where the value of U varies from 0 to 11. Since we are computing the ground state and the excited state determinants, we're going to put the same weight on the ground state and the excited state. This way the selection is not going to favor either the ground state or the excited state. This leads to this type of situation where the variational energy and the second order perturbation correction to the energy seem to have between the ground state and the excited states maintain the band gap quite constant when we use the determinants, meaning that the selection is giving the same importance to the ground state and the excited state. This is a lifesaver or a time saver in this case, since we are not able to converge properly these systems, but we can think that we are introducing the same error for the ground state and the excited state. When we use these wave functions as a trial wave function for our system, and we use them in DMC and we compute the band gap, we can see that actually this multi-reference wave function, despite being better, or at least decreasing the variance of the system, leads to a very large value of the band gap. And this cannot be just justified by strong finite size errors. So something is still off with these orbitals. We choose to investigate by using the one-body reduced density matrix and analyzing where the excitation comes from. In this specific case here, for the RDM, here we represent the first 60 orbitals. These ones here are occupied orbitals, while the dash points here on the higher parts correspond to the unoccupied orbitals. This here would be the limit between the valence and conduction bands. And this is here the difference between the single determinant PB ground state minus excited states. So this will describe us where, when we do an excitation, where does the electron come from in the case of the single determinant and in the case of the multi-determinant. In this first picture A here, we can see that when we do an excitation, it seems like we are taking an electron from deep inside the orbitals and putting it rather high in the conduction band, which is counterintuitive, since in the case of the lithium cobalt dioxide, the band gap is supposed to be created from the valence to the conduction, and we were expecting to see things happening here. When we do a multi-determinant on top of PBE orbitals, what we see is that we are kind of improving the quality here of the orbitals near the conduction band, since now they are starting to be closer to the conduction, and we are taking kind of a linear combination of the existence of these electrons, and we're just moving them here and up. So the single determinant seems to be rather off in describing our system, and this might explain why we were really off by having that value of 6.2 eV at the DMC level. But the multi-determinant is not doing much better, since we are still taking electrons from deep inside here, the valence, the occupied region. So it is clear that we need to go beyond these PBE orbitals, and we decided to generate natural orbitals. Natural orbitals, since we have access to the one-body RDM, are rather easy to generate. However, because we are far in the selected sCI scheme, we are far from convergence, we use a scheme where we generate the natural orbitals adiabatically, meaning that we are gonna do one cycle of multi-determinants by generating 5 million determinants. Then we do natural orbitals, and we start our selection from this improved set of orbitals, and we do this for PBE+U orbitals at 0, 3, 5, 7, and 11. We iterate 5 times, and then we generate the natural orbitals until we consider that the energy stopped moving, and we are at a case where we have introduced all the important determinants in our system. When we do this, we compare the overlap between these wave functions at different values of U for the ground state and the excited state. What we discover is rather astounding, that the ground state, either we start from PBE orbitals from different values of U, or from natural orbitals, the overlap is almost the same. So we are not actually making much differences by using PBE+U for describing the ground state. As we can see here, all the wave functions are the same. However, the excited state is really different. The PBE orbitals are all over the place, depending on the number of determinants that we introduce in the system. However, for the natural orbitals, so now we have that cycle. Remember, the natural orbitals are using this cycle of 5 loops over the natural orbitals. Either we use U equals 3, 5, or 7, except for the 7 that is a little bit off here. We are almost at the same wave function between the 3 wave functions, meaning that by using natural orbitals and starting from different values of U with PBE, natural orbitals remove any difference, and we are actually running with the exact same wave function. Now, if we use this new natural orbitals in our trial wave function, and we see the one-body RDM, and here we see just the ground state minus the excited state. We see now that when we do this excitation, most of the change now is coming from the homolumo or conduction valence region border here, which is exactly what we anticipate to see from this class of materials where we do an excitation. So what it says is that we have been able to correct the quality of the orbitals by using natural orbitals, and now we see that the excitation is coming from where it's supposed to come from. This translates also at the DMC level, where now when we use natural orbitals, our energy is significantly reduced and we are almost at the experimental value. However, obviously, since we are functioning in a very small cell, the strong finite size errors are still remaining and might justify these differences here. In summary, I would like to say that we were able to generate very accurate trial wave function for small periodic systems, especially needing especially using natural orbitals. The ground state is probably okay using density functional theory. However, if we want to describe the excited state, it seems like the orbitals coming from PBE and even PBE+U are rather off. The natural orbitals provide significant better wave function for DMC, and additional work is in progress if we want to expand the method to even larger systems. So with this, I would like to thank my collaborators and our funding agencies, the CPSFM Center, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.